Okay, welcome to another installment of Ask Eddie and Ann. Ann, It's good to see you. You're looking particularly refreshed and lovely tonight.
Thank you so much.
Um,
Yes, this is what happens when we record on a day when people are in the office.
oh, okay. So you mean you kind of
Nicer
have to?
shirt instead of a t-shirt. Yeah.
Okay, okay, very good, very good. It has been an incredibly hectic few since the last time. I don't even remember. Time means nothing to me any longer. It's all an incredible blur. And but since the last time we did one of these, I have been just moving constantly, and it's all been very good. So that's all I have to say before we commence here.
Yeah, and so when this airs, you'll have just come back from DC, which means that Foster will be in DC this weekend.
Okay, fantastic. And all of my plans were changing radically as of today. I spent the entire day altering my travel plans for various reasons. Coming back from DC. Anyway, but it's all good. It's all good. It's because I do DC and then I go to the Morelia International Film Festival in Mexico to
Huh?
introduce some of the Argentine noirs that we have restored, and then I come back and I have a few down days before I leave to go on the TCM cruise,
That's right. I forgot
uh,
about that.
which I'm very happy about and very excited about because there's some really cool people going on the cruise that I get to spend a lot of time with and interview and introduce a lot of really great movies. So I was very pleased because uh, you know the five hosts, we never argue or bicker about anything, but they always say, "Here's what we're going to be doing, and who wants to put in a bid." Not a monetary bid, but a request to introduce a certain thing. And
Yeah.
so it's always amusing to see how that all shakes out. But I was so happy that I got like virtually all of my requests. So I'm excited.
Cool.
Um, but I'm going to stop talking about that because if people listening aren't going on the TCM cruise, then I'm not even going to tease them with what they're missing, But I'm excited about it, and then when I come back, I'll finally be able to take a little break and get like a week's rest or something. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
Cool.
So shall we just
Let's
dive
do
right
it.
in? There
Yeah.
are some really I previewed this a little bit. There are some really really good questions in here. So let's just rock and roll. Let's do it, in.
Okay, and this is from our friends Jay and Connie in Ann Arbor. What's the deal with the short ties in mid-century movies? Some of them appear to be only 10 to 12 inches long. Was it fabric rationing? Or if the tie isn't hanging down low, it doesn't get into the spaghetti sauce.
uh, Interesting question. Um, okay, let me think about this for a second. I think that the ties were shorter because most men wore suits, and the suits were cut differently than modern suits are cut, and they buttoned higher so that you didn't have to have as much fabric. And also, men back then, it was a stylistic thing that I totally agree with, that you were supposed to button the suit jacket in order to improve what they call the silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
So if your jacket's hanging open, this is so funny to think of in terms of modern life,
Yeah.
where people go to work in sweat clothes and things. But back in the 40s, it was like you dressed in a suit when you left the house, and you wanted that suit to look really sharp, and buttoned is better for that effect. And so the ties didn't have to be as long because they were underneath the suit, particularly double breasted suits, which obviously button higher because even though there's more fabric in the suit jacket, it crosses over and so it hides a lot of the tie. Also, men wore vests more often back then, so the tie didn't have to be very long because it was underneath the vest. Uh, And other than that, it's just a thing. I don't think it was expected that the tie had to go down to where the tip of the tie would meet the the belt buckle, which became kind of a thing in fashion later on. And then, forgive me, I have to say it, then the 45th president of the United States completely destroyed all fashion notions by wearing ties that are so ridiculously long that they're essentially at crotch level. And for whatever reason, the suit jacket is open so that the tie is like the all red tie is pointing directly to the crotch. Uh, to me, not a good look. So anyway, that's the deal. I don't think it had anything to do with rationing, but man, those try to make a silk tie today that's affordable. It's next to impossible. Trust me, I know. I've tried. So Jay and Connie, thank you for the question. Jay and Connie are the greatest.
Yes, they are.
They put me up when I was in at Noir City, Detroit. They don't live in Detroit; they live in Ann Arbor, and they're wonderful. We'll be hearing more from Jay and Connie because they're always coming up with clever ideas to do donation drives and things for the Film Noir Foundation. But when they ask questions, they're always kind of esoteric and clever. So thanks for fielding that one, Ann, and putting it at the top of the list. Okay, so this is our friend Kathleen from Chicago, which I assume is Kathleen Geyer, who always sends in really good questions. But I missed her in Chicago this past time because I didn't see her there, and that wasn't good because I like talking to Kathleen. So here is her question. She has questions about international noir. Uh, and this is Kathleen speaking. In my opinion, the countries with the strongest cinematic noir traditions are France, Japan, the United Kingdom, and Mexico. Do you agree? I guess that's kind of question number one. And she would love to hear the two of us discuss each of those four noir traditions, plus others if we'd like. But essentially, she's asking, what do French, Japanese, British, and Mexican noirs have in common with US noir, and how do they differ? Okay. So, Anne, any thoughts on that, or do you want me to dive in and we'll knock it back and forth?
Well, it's gonna kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the first part, about the countries with the strongest cinematic noir, because obviously Argentina has a very strong cinematic noir, and also a lot of times it's what we've seen. Like, I would be really interested in seeing more Scandinavian noir from the classic period because they have such a strong presence in crime, and really Noirish modern noir crime.
Absolutely. In modern noir, Scandinavian noir is a whole thing, you know.
Yeah. So
Hey,
it'd be
it's dark. It's
interesting.
dark 6 months out of the year. You know, it's got to that helps.
That helps, yeah, and the drinking. Yeah, so I would like to know more about their classic era noir because a few things that we've shown I thought were really excellent.
I totally agree. But the thing that's well, I mean, I'm going to answer this question as best I can, but like you're suggesting, there's a bit of a caveat in that you can only really comment on what's available to see, right? And that's why the Film Noir Foundation, thanks to Fernando Martin Peña in Buenos Aires, the fact that we've been able to recover and restore, a somewhat significant amount of noir leads you to believe there was a noir tradition in Argentina as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's necessarily true. I mean, I can't. It's certainly not like France, where there is unquestionably a noir tradition. So, but because of Fernando's curatorial skills and the fact that he like paved the way for my understanding of what was happening in Argentina and directed me towards, a half dozen or more really great examples of noir. Am I, is that the tip of the iceberg, or am I seeing all that Argentina really had to produce, right? So that's where that's what you don't know about. Um, there's always an example that sneaks out that you realize, wow, they were making like noirish films in South Korea and India. And there's even a couple of things I've seen from the Philippines. Um, and obviously Germany and Italy, Europe has a noir tradition that's stronger than most of the other continents. But to directly address Kathleen's question, um, I mean, they're all kind of united in the sense that they are all movies about people living in the margins or outside the law. There's a criminal aspect to all of them, but I mean, Kathleen, there is a book in this, obviously, but for our purposes right now, I'll just say that French film noir is more romantic than American film noir, because it grew out of like a poetic realism thing that was happening in the late 30s in France, and the sense of doomed romance because they were in that part of the world. I mean, that the geopolitics of Europe made the idea that if you found the love of your life, you could lose them the very next day, was much more palpable in European cinema than it is in American cinema. So I would say that that's the main thing about French movies, is that there's a romanticism at work that exceeds what you found in American films. Um, it's interesting. I'm trying to think if this is going to will have aired by the time we do our next show. When is this one airing again?
The 19th.
The 19th. Okay. No, coming up on my Noir Alley show, I'll be showing Jacques Becker's Casque d'Or. Uh, and that's like the ultimate romantic noir. Like if you want to talk about French film noir, that's it, right? And it's not the 40s, it's the Belle Epoque era in France, but it's just a tremendous film. And to me, that's like definitive, like why France does it differently. Although in my intros and outros to the film, I go the extra mile to say, look, if this film was made in America, these are the actors that would have played the parts. This is how it would have been the same. This is how it would have been different. Because I just want those skeptical TCM fans to hang with a foreign language film, especially one as good as that. Um, Japan, in a nutshell, is gangster obsessed. So Yakuza films are, most of the noir stuff out of Japan is about organized crime, because that's what happened in post World War II Japan. I mean, organized crime got a real foothold in the society because the country was rebuilding and the black market was in extremis, and so most of those movies are, most of their crime and noir films are gangster based, and then in the 60s it became like a totally surreal thing,
Yeah.
like untethered from reality. Those Seijun Suzuki movies, and Branded to Kill and Tokyo Drifter, those have absolutely no basis in reality whatsoever. They're just pure cinematic craziness, and that's what they're most known for. The UK, the films are very similar to the United States, uh, but there's more of a class issue. I mean, you see that in Hollywood movies. It's a thing, but it's always a subtext. in America, they try to hide that. It
Yeah.
was like you weren't supposed to talk about the haves versus the have-nots, whereas in England, it was a big thing, like the underclass and all the the spivs and the wide boys and all that stuff, and a whole criminal underclass. Um, and yet they're still British.
Yeah.
So the British aspects of it are still they'll never be as tough as the American movies.
Which is really strange because like British criminals are insanely violent, and that's what's so weird. They
Absolutely.
don't show it, but I don't know if people are like familiar with the craze, but like one of them actually carried a samurai sword. I mean, these guys, I
Yep.
mean, I would really rather have to deal with an American gangster than a British gangster, and I'll
Absolutely,
just
but
leave it
but
at
it's
that.
interesting. It's interesting, and that in the original era, the there was still some decorum in the way the movies were made,
Mhm.
and so they were like, "Oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want to go that far." But then, of course, in the 1980s, well, not even the 80s, the 70s, Get Carter changed everything,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's as mean and nasty and brutal a movie as has ever been made. And then when Bob Hoskins became a star and was doing the Long Good Friday and Mona Lisa and pictures like that, then British noir actually surpassed American noir for being really like in your face, violent and tough, and those films are just spectacular to me. Sexy Beast with Ben
Yeah.
Kingsley. Oh, for God's sakes, that's off the charts. And then in Mexico, it's melodrama. I mean, it's and one of the major things that's really interesting to note about Mexican noir is that the women are such prominent characters.
Hmm.
Right, most of the Mexican noir that I've seen has featured female protagonists,
Yeah.
right? And because there's a whole genre in Mexico called cabareturera films that are about women nightclub performers, and those are the noir films. So in America, you would see a movie like I don't know, The Racket or I Walk Alone or something like that, where there's a female character who works as a nightclub entertainer. Rarely is that woman the protagonist of the story in America. In Mexico, she is the star of the movie, and those films are just incredible. Like I'm so gratified that right now Film Forum is showing uh, Victims of Sin, the Nino Sevilla film, on in a restored 4K version of that film that's playing for multiple weeks at Film Forum in New York. I actually presented the film at Film Forum, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, in the only 35 millimeter print that was around. And it's such a fantastic movie. Did you saw it at Noir City, right? Yeah, just great. So, and as I've said many a time, Hispanic noir is hot.
Yeah.
It plays really hot and very melodramatic. All the emotions are in a super keyed up high, which is fantastic. I love that stuff.
Oh, so I think this has reminded me of this. So at the PFA, if there's people uh here in the Bay Area, the PFA is playing a series of Buñuel films. And in November, I think it's November 5th, they're playing his version of Wuthering Heights that he filmed in Mexico, which is my favorite version of Wuthering Heights because it took a Spaniard to understand the novel. It's not romantic. And it's also probably my favorite use of a piece of classical music in a movie at the end. Um, so anyway, I just wanted to tell people that because if they haven't seen it,
But
you should go see it. It's incredible.
uh, God damn, I'm drawing a blank. But it's not called Wuthering Heights. It's called
Yeah,
um,
Wuthering Heights was the Americanized, the title they used for the States. Um,
I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, I'm endorsing exactly what you're saying because Buñuel's Mexican films are fantastic.
They are.
You know, El and the Criminal Life of Archibaldo de la Cruz and Los Olivados. These are all amazing films, and I wouldn't mind programming a whole. I would love to like program a whole Luis Buñuel thing on TCM.
That'd be
I mean,
fantastic.
I just don't think that younger people today have an understanding of how important he was in world cinema, and that he was the great cinema surrealist during the classic era, and he had such a totally even saying the word modern doesn't really capture it. Uh, you know, he was so far ahead of his time in the way he made films and the way he thought about things. And he was also a fabulous martini drinker.
Yes.
Uh, and in fact, I make my martinis specifically the way Luis Buñuel made his martinis. That's
I,
a
I did when I was still drinking also.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
they're
You
great.
know, yep. You pour the vermouth over the rocks, and then you stir it around, and then you pour the vermouth out, and then you put the gin in, and you stir it, and with a twist, it's like infallible. It's the best. Okay, Kathleen, thank you for that question. I hope that was a somewhat sufficient answer. It's such a expansive subject, and one that is dear to me right now because I'm so excited about learning so much more that is still out there to understand. And you know, for the good souls who watch our program, I'll just say that you know, the next Noir City Festival in 2024 will deal with exactly this point that Kathleen is bringing up, because I'm going to be showing an American-made film noir on a double bill with a foreign film noir that where they complement each other, so you can see precisely how the cultures differ and how they may be the same. So, and we're really trying to get a wide range of films, not just French films, not, you know, Japan and France and Mexico and the UK figure in it, but we also have German films, Italian films, Scandinavian films, Japanese films. I already said that. So a film from Brazil, Argentina, you know, this is the most interesting aspect of studying noir for me at this point.
Okay, and this is from Alan. Eddie, have you been to the fairly new Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue in Los Angeles? Have you ever taken one of those Hollywood tour buses?
Okay, that's interesting. Alan is asking about the Hollywood Museum on Highland at Hollywood Boulevard in Highland. I have never set foot inside that building, and that's I've just never had the opportunity to do it. As much as I have lived my life on Hollywood Boulevard in the last 20, almost 25 years, I've
Yeah.
never actually gone in that building. But
So
and
that's the
don't
one, sorry, that's the one in the Max Factor building, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. Well, then you should talk about it. I mean, because I have never been in it, but I can tell you. You talk about it, and then I'll tell you an interesting fact about Max Factor that I think is really intriguing.
Well, the cool thing is when you go in, they still have like the Max Factor on the first floor. So you get, because they had like a brunette room, a redhead room, and a blonde room separately. So it was really, that was almost more, I mean, so that was really fascinating to learn about Max Factor and see that and the whole history of it. And then, so they have sort of upstairs then like revolving exhibits. So it's not always the same, but it was kind of amazing when I went because they had like costumes and shoes and like they had like Joan Crawford's and her feet were so tiny. Like I always, because some of these actresses, you really think of them as being tall and stuff. And it's really funny
Oh,
then to see.
Joan was like pint sized.
I
Yeah.
know, which I always assumed she was like 5'8" or something. That was such a shock. So they have like memorabilia and stuff. Yeah, it was fun. And if
I
you
hear
could,
they have they have one of the greatest collections of Maryland stuff is in that museum. I don't know
yeah,
if if it was there when you uh,
probably, I'm not like a huge, there was, I'm just not like a huge Maryland fan. So that's not particularly what struck me.
but it's interesting. When you went, did you get the sense that more women go there than men because they know it's the original Max Factor thing? And just
No, I think most people don't go there because of the Max Factor thing. I think most people go there because it's the Hollywood Museum. And it was like an even split. There didn't seem
okay.
to be more women than men. If anything, there might have been more men there actually.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for the two or three people who may be watching this who don't know who Max Factor is.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the cosmetic king of Hollywood, and here comes a creeping Charlotte or Emily behind you.
It's Emily.
Emily,
She was
Emily.
actually under my desk. She just moved there
Oh,
a couple minutes ago.
okay, very good. Yeah, she just snuck up there. But Max Factor was a crucial part of Hollywood history because he developed the makeup that they used in films in the transition from silent films to talking pictures. He kind of created pancake makeup, but then he revised it because it was difficult to make the transition to color because the original makeup they used in Hollywood um, appeared too reddish when it was shot on color film. And so Max Factor actually devised a thinner, like veneer makeup that made everybody look great, men and women. Uh, and he didn't live very long. He I think he died in 1936 or something in a complications from a car accident. But Max Factor Cosmetics became an American institution. But I just want to say briefly that if people subscribe or they don't subscribe, if they donate to the Film Noir Foundation, they will get the Noir City magazine. And the latest issue of the Noir City magazine has a story in which that features Max Factor only because this is so fascinating to me. The story by John Ranovic starts off talking about Max Factor and his contributions to Hollywood history, but then drops him completely because it's his brother, John Factor. And you have to understand, it's Maximilian, I think, Faktorowicz or something. He was Polish. And Isaac Johann Faktorich or whatever. Uh, John Factor was Max Factor's brother, younger brother, and he became a notorious gangster in Chicago. John Factor was known as Jake the Barber because he had a barber shop in Chicago. He undercut his competition, and then when he had made his quote unquote fortune and in barbering, he invested the proceeds in very. He was a land swindler, and then he had an amazing life story that I will truncate here by just saying that he got in real trouble with the feds, and Legs Diamond bailed him out and like funded an emergency trip to Europe to get John Factor out of the country, Jake the Barber, and then when he came back into the country, um, Legs Diamond put out a contract on him, and somehow because he didn't pay him back for all this stuff he did for him, and he and John Factor ended up being one of the leading contributors to John F. Kennedy's presidential campaign in 1960. So
Wow.
it's just it's all noir all the time in this country. That's all I can say. And you can read all about that in the latest issue of the Noir City magazine.
Yeah, you can just go to filmnoirfoundation.org, go to the contribute page, contribute $20 or more. And you also have to sign up on our email list because we'll send you a link to download the digital version of the magazine. So
Right.
when you do that, you get the digital version of the magazine.
Correct. You can just buy the magazine on Amazon
If you want the print edition.
if you want the printed edition. And as we always say, Ann, that money doesn't necessarily come to us. It actually goes to Amazon, but people love their print editions. So I recommend that people do both. Donate to the foundation, get a digital edition that includes all sorts of great interactive links. You can you can watch film clips and all this stuff through the links in the digital edition that do not exist in the print edition. But the print edition you can hold in your hand and read it. So it's best of both worlds.
And they look nice. The print editions look nice.
They do. They do.
I was real happy about that.
I'm not being critical of Amazon because they can send it to you the next day. If you buy it, you can get it the next day practically, or yeah, realistically you can get it the next day, delivered to your house. But we don't. They keep most of the money.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. John Weber in Tampa, Florida, says, "Well, I've always known there were films called film noir. It all really started for me in 1915. 1915. See what an old school guy I am? It all really started for me in 2015. I took the Summer of Darkness course and watched every Friday from 6 a.m. till midnight using the DVR to record those I missed to watch later." John is talking about Turner Classic Movies now. "Those Fridays also introduced me to Eddie Muller. Eddie, how did you get involved with this? Did you have any connection to TCM prior to that summer?" And then he says, "Remember, we'll always have the Summer of Darkness." So I'm glad that I got you hooked, John. Thank you. So actually, my involvement with TCM dates back to the original Summer of Darkness, which I think was in 2004. I'm going to say that even though I'm not 100% sure that that is correct. So I had written Dark City Dames, my book about those 6 actresses who were synonymous with film noir. And TCM reached out to me and said, and forgive me, I may have told this story previously, but because John asked this specific question, I'm telling it again. TCM reached out to me and I thought, here's my big break. And they loved my book so much they want to put me on TCM or something. And then it was like, no, we want you to introduce us to the actresses so that we can interview them for TCM. And for those people who have not read Dark City Dames, that was Jane Greer, Marie Windsor, Audrey Totter, Colin Gray, Anne Savage, and Evelyn Keyes were the 6 actresses that I interviewed for that book. And they got, I don't think they got all of them on the show because they were like the centerpiece of the Summer of Darkness in 2004. But I thought they would ask me to come and interview them, but no, I was nobody. So initially it was supposed to be Alec Baldwin that would interview them, who would have been really great.
Yeah.
They ended up getting Scott Glenn, who's a fine actor, but he was kind of just like a tough guy that they needed that male energy opposite all these women. But Scott didn't really know that much about the movies. So I was a paid consultant to write Scott Glenn's questions for those shows, and that was it. And there was a wonderful guy named Charlie Coates who produced all of that, who is no longer at TCM, I'm sorry to say. And that was sort of how I made my first connection to TCM. And the last thing I'll just say about that is that God loved Marie Windsor. She was the greatest, because Marie was more upset that I wasn't doing the interviews than I was.
Yeah.
So every time Scott Glenn would ask Marie a question, she would say, "Well, as Eddie Muller noted in his book
Oh,
Dark City,"
God bless
yeah,
her.
she would do that every time, forcing them to put a picture of my book up on the screen so people knew what she was talking about. She Marie was the greatest, because Marie had been kicked around a little bit in the business, and she knew, like, is this my turn? And it's like, nope, you're not getting that role. And so she knew I felt exactly the same way. Like, they bypassed me for somebody else and they
Yeah.
cast Scott Glenn instead. And so Marie was like, I'll do right by Eddie. And that was just fabulous. Bless you, Marie. You were the greatest.
No. And is there any chance that books can get republished? Because I know I've talked about your book before, which is kind of funny because I found it, like, I was at Berkeley waiting to go to something at the PFA, and I found it and I picked it up, and I had never known you had written that book. So it was like this really great surprise because, one, the book looked really interesting, and it was your book. But that's still, I think, one of the best books about women in Hollywood, because the way you structured the book is the first half of the book are the interviews about when they were in Hollywood making films, and then the second half of the book was sort of their lives after. And it just was so fascinating because I felt like it gave a really good look at what it meant to be an actress in Hollywood, and probably still does. But it's such a great book, and the interviews are just so fascinating.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Uh, it will be republished. I'm actually working on the. It's not really a revised edition. It's an expanded edition, because yeah, the Running Press, the same publisher who did the revised and expanded edition of Dark City, and did my Noir Bar cocktail book, and did the children's book Kitty Farrell and the Case of the Marshmallow Monkey. We've got a good thing going on, and so they will republish Dark City Dames, the Wicked Women of film noir. It'll probably come out in 2025. uh, and it's tricky because that book is really the book exists because I was able to spend a lot of time with those six women and really get down to the nitty gritty of their life stories, the good stuff and the really bad stuff. And Running Press just felt like we don't want to just do the exact same book. So I'm going to write about like a dozen other actresses, but I don't have these are not actresses I'll be able to interview
Yeah.
in any kind of intimate way. So it's just like observations about other actresses that you can kind of compare what they went through with what these six women that I really knew went through. And Running Press does beautiful books, so I'm sure it will be a spectacular tome. So I do want to say this before we move on, just because I know this is going to be released after the announcement is made. So I'm just thrilled that the Hollywood Reporter, which is one of the two Bibles of the movie industry, Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, has just done a thing, and people watching this may know this already because it has been announced before this will be up on the internet. They did a balloting of industry people, filmmakers, writers, critics, all kinds of people, to choose the 100 greatest film books of all time. And I was truly stunned that Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir is one of those books.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
uh, the thing that is so funny about that is that I was one of the people they asked to vote on the 100 greatest film books, and I did not vote for myself.
Okay, good, good.
Right? I just felt like I am not to be mentioned in the same breath as Kevin Brownlow and James Agee
Yeah.
and Lillian Ross's fantastic book Picture about the making of um, the Red Badge of Courage, which is just a spectacular book.
Yeah.
And a lot of great memoirs. I will confess, I wrote in Tab Hunter Confidential, The Making of a Movie Star, which I wrote with Tab, which I actually do believe is one of the best Hollywood memoirs ever because of Tab, because he was so honest and open and talking to me. Dark City Dames was not on the ballot.
Well,
right?
was oh God, what's it called? Mayor Selznick's book, which I consider the best book on Hollywood. I read Mayor Selznick's book.
Yes, yeah, and I have to be honest as I'm talking to you right now, and I don't know what the other 99 books are. I don't know, but actually, the day we are recording this, the entire list is going to be announced tomorrow.
Okay.
But I have to say, I'm humbled by that, considering how many incredibly great books have been written about the movies, because it's memoirs by people who made the movies. It's critical works. It's genre studies. It's a very, very expansive list. I forget how many books were on it, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. And it was really daunting to try to go through this. And so you had to think like, well, what book, like I obviously voted for the Hitchcock Truffaut book.
Yeah.
The interview thing that Truffaut did, because that was the first film book I ever owned.
Yeah.
And that just, I probably read through that book a dozen times, and that was part of my film education. So that damn well better be on that list, because my book is certainly not as important or as influential as that book. But
and it's also interesting too. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about, because it's kind of thinking about the film books that really had an impact on me and on other people. But I think one of the really interesting things is that, like, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, which is really an academic book, but she was the one who created the term final girl, which is something that people know. And I'm always kind of surprised by how many people that I see doing like horror commentary that don't necessarily have an academic background, but like are aware of that book, and that's where the final girl came from, which is really pretty amazing, because that's something where I've really seen that ripple past people that just would read academic stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's anyway. I'm very curious to see, and I don't have to wait too long, because obviously it's the evening now.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, the Hollywood Reporter will come out, and it will be a special issue about the 100 greatest film books. And I'm just thrilled to be on that list. So
I'm excited to see what's on there. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I'm so am I. And I don't know how they're doing it, or if they're breaking it up by category, or if they're just saying this is 1 to 100 based on how many votes the book's received or something. In which case, I would entirely expect to be like number 100 or 99 or something. But you still make the cut. So
who cares if you're dead last? You still made the list.
You still made the cut. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Not going to hurt sales either.
Okay. And somehow we're like we're only on question 5, and
Five.
we're okay. We got to
Uh-oh.
pick up the pace
Okay,
here.
we gotta
Okay.
pick up the pace, man. 555. This is from Janine. Can you tell me why Notorious is no longer shown on TCM and the wonderful film noir Sleep, My Love with Claudette Colbert, Donna Michi, and Robert Cummings? Will that ever be shown?
Okay, that is a rights issue, as most of these things are, because that is a David O. Selznick film, produced
Okay.
film, and it belongs to the Selznick estate. And for whatever reason, they make these decisions as to how they're going to allow the film to be presented. I I think Criterion Collection did a beautiful edition of Notorious a while back, but broadcast of the film is few and far between, and that's the reason why. And it's the same thing with Sleep My Love. Sleep My Love is a little bit different. Well, yes and no. I mean, they're both independently made films. RKO distributed Notorious, but Selznick produced it. And I'm pretty sure RKO or United Artists, somebody distributed Sleep My Love, but it was an independently made film. I think it was Triangle Productions, which was actually Mary Pickford's company. And the reason those are hard for TCM is because TCM uh, generally licenses films in packages. And if it's a small thing or a one-off, like it's one film that we want to show, like let's say Sleep My Love, there's nobody that's responsible for Triangle Productions films any longer. So it's very, very hard for the people who do that job of licensing films and paying for them to even locate the people who could okay it. So, Sleep My Love has been restored by the UCLA Film and Television Archive. And I've shown it this past year. I've shown
Yeah.
it a bunch of times in theaters, but the rules are entirely different for showing films on television. Because when you show it in a theater, there's no possibility that the film is going to be pirated or recorded. When you show it on television, that's it. I mean, you could totally lose control of it because somebody will record it and then they will upload it to the internet or they'll put out a bootleg DVD or something. So either the people are overly protective of the films or just protective of the films, or uh, or nobody even knows who the people are to approach about this stuff. So um, it always comes down to being a rights issue. I'm sorry to say, but I've heard this question a lot about Notorious, which is a damn shame because you could argue that that's top 5 Alfred Hitchcock, and the fact that it is not readily available is kind of bizarre. Anyway, okay. Brett in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, asks or says, one of the things that makes noir so versatile is that it can be fused with other genres or settings. For example, noir is mixed with science fiction, western, horror, comedy, and so on. What are your favorite noir fusion genres, and which films do you consider definitive examples of a noir western, noir science fiction, etc.? Okay, let's go through this. We'll start with westerns, okay,
Okay.
and then we'll each give one. So I would say that the definitive noir western is Pursued by Raoul Walsh with Robert Mitchum and Teresa Wright, and beautiful cinematography by James Wong Howe. To me, that's like, and it's very Freudian, and it just you can't mistake it. It feels so much like a film noir, just one set in the Old West.
I would probably say The Furies.
Beautiful.
With
Yeah.
Barbara Stanwyck. And if I don't want to say too much about it, but if you have not seen that movie, watch that movie. It is incredible and has probably the most shocking piece of violence I have ever seen in a film because I I was not expecting
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, great call. Okay, there are two really good examples, and there are a lot.
Yeah.
Blood on the Moon, Ramrod, uh, uh, Day of the Outlaw, another Andre de Toth film. Um,
The Bud
Secret,
Bedecker films. No Name on the Bullet. I'm going to
No
plug
Name
No
on the
Name on the
Bullet
Bullet
once
again.
again. Anne gets in a plug for No Name on the Bullet. Secret of Convict Lake, that's another good one. Okay, so those are the westerns. How about a war movie? Do you have a war movie that you think of as being noir? Because I mean, in
I
the
guess
40s, they count.
Steel
Oh,
Helmet.
fantastic! Yeah, great choice. Yep, Sam Fuller's Steel Helmet
Yeah.
with Gene Evans, fantastic movie. I will say Don Siegel's Hell is for Heroes with Steve McQueen and a bunch of really unusual uh, casting, like Bob
Bob
Newhart.
Newhart's in that one.
Bob Newhart is in that film. Trini Lopez is in that film. Uh, but Steve McQueen is the noir character at the center of that movie. You know, like the crazy psychopath who is the hero. And it's a really interesting film because it says, you know, the people who are heroes in war are not necessarily good people. Steve McQueen is a crazy person in that film, but it's the guy who saves the day at the end, and it's black and white. It's beautiful. Okay, how about a fantasy film? I'm gonna guess I know what your answer is to like, which is not sci-fi. It's a fantasy film. What would
Fantasy.
I come on, Ann? I know what it is because you always say it's like one of your favorite films. It's one the Film Noir Foundation has restored.
Oh, yeah, I guess it is fantasy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Repeat performance.
Repeat performance.
Because when I hear
Yes.
fantasy, I think like unicorns and stuff. But no, it is fantasy. That is actually what fantasy is.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, repeat performance, which everyone should see. I'm really serious.
I agree.
I love
And I think
that
they should
movie.
buy. I think they should buy the Blu-ray DVD
You
set
should.
from
You
Foot
should
and
buy
Mouth.
it. I own it.
However, I'm going to go a different route and say that my favorite film noir fantasy film is Alias Nick Beale,
It's a great movie.
which I just think is John Farrow's masterpiece. I don't think Ray Milland has ever been better. It's a fantastic role for two roles for Thomas Mitchell and Audrey Totter are both incredible in that film, and Jonathan Latimer's screenplay is perfection itself, and I just can't rave enough about that movie. It's the last movie I did an audio commentary for. I kind of came out of retirement to do the commentary for that film because I love it so much.
And also Night of the Hunter. Which because to me it's like a fairy tale. There's just that. I mean, in some ways it's sort of anchored in reality, but in another way it does feel like fantasy to me.
Yes, stylistically it feels very much like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But none of it is fantasy.
Right.
Because in fact, if you do
that's right.
Get the Noir City magazine, there is a story in the new issue about the character that Harry Powell, played by Robert Mitchum in Night of the Hunter, the actual guy, the actual serial killer that character is based on. We have a story in our true crime issue about the actual dude. His name was Harm Drent, was the guy's real name.
Serial killer.
But he went by the name of Harry Powers, which Davis Grubb, the author of Night of the Hunter, changed to Harry Powell.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a very good call on that one. Yes. Okay, for sci-fi, sorry, all you Blade Runner fans, I'm picking Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
I'm sorry, was there another answer?
No, that's the only answer. Well, younger people will say it's obviously Blade Runner because it's a detective story, you know, set in the future. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers is the great paranoid, crazy movie of all time. And I like Phil Kaufman's version as well, but
Hmm.
Don Siegel's original one has such an intense noir vibe.
Yes.
And I love it. I love that movie start to finish. Okay, and I saved this one for last, and horror film that's like a noir, but it's a horror film. What would be your choice?
Everything by Val Lewton.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, everything by Val Lewton.
Yeah, but I mean, if I was going to pick one Val Lewton for Noir, I think I'd probably pick The Leopard Man because that's actually
Okay,
based on a Cornwall Woolrich story.
fantastic. Um, and then there's my Val Lewton would be The Seventh Victim,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
and I'm going to tie that in. Ooh, boy, well done, Ed. I'm going to tie it in to my actual choice for the best horror noir film by saying there's a scene in The Seventh Victim that predicts the most famous scene in horror movies of all time, which is the shower scene in Psycho. And that's my choice for the horror noir hybrid
yeah,
would be Psycho,
yeah,
right? I mean, my book Dark City basically ends with that movie saying that this is where it all changed,
yeah.
because Psycho starts out as a film noir and it turns into a horror movie with the shower sequence, which is probably, I would say, probably one of the three or four landmark scenes in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Meaning, with the true meaning of landmark, like everything is different after that happened,
Mhm.
right? And yeah, so those are my choices. That was a really Brett in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Thank you for that question.
It was
That
good.
was that was really fun. Okay,
Okay, and this is from Brian in Toronto. As I write this, TCM is playing Straight Time from 1978 with Dustin Hoffman and Harry Dean Stanton. Noirs often glamorize criminals and heists, but this seems very realistic. It seems to be considered a neo noir, and I wonder what Eddie's take is on the film and both of these actors.
I like the movie very much, and it feels realistic because the whole thing was written by Eddie Bunker, who was a criminal and an ex-con who got out and turned his life around by writing books, and it's based on his book No Beast So Fierce. And yeah, I think it's terrific. Hoffman was the force behind making that movie because he wanted to play something different than a typical Dustin Hoffman kind of nebbishy character, and so he wanted to play this hardened criminal, and he also was directing the movie, but that didn't work. So they brought in Ulu Grossbard to direct the film, and I when I first saw that movie when it came out, which is what 1978 or something, I didn't love it, but over time, Grossbard's approach to the whole story has really grown on me, and I really think it's one of the great crime movies, uh, unvarnished crime films. And I think the performances are all great, not just Hoffman and Harry Dean Stanton, who actually gets to sing in the movie, which I'm I feel like he wrote it in the contract. Like, I'm only going to do this movie if you let me sit by the swimming pool and play my guitar and sing. Uh, but Gary Busey is also in that film, and he is terrific. And Teresa Russell is also really good in that film. She's an unusual actress because she's so beautiful that um, I don't think people think she's as good as she actually is, or as smart in her performances as she actually is. Because
Um, she's a great actress, and
yeah,
actually, I met her, and she was super cool because I was actually talking to Nicholas Rogue because I wanted him to sign something for me because they had just shown he was there for a screening of the film with Harvey Keitel and Teresa, and she was super cool because she was like completely pulled back, and that was really interesting to me because she knew I really wanted to talk to her husband, and I thought, because you always hear about actresses being so egotistical, but she was totally like you know what I mean? And she wasn't like being rude or anything like that, but she was obviously just not like giving me my time with him and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to explain. But it's
So
like
that was Bad Timing is the movie you're
bad
talking
timing.
about.
Yeah.
Bad Timing, yeah.
Yeah.
Which she's terrific in that film.
Yeah.
She was just a very, very courageous actress. I mean, she did a lot of films that other actresses would have just turned down flat.
Oh, horror was great.
Yeah,
and that's that's one of the few like really realistic films about prostitution, and
yeah,
she was amazing in that.
So yeah, she's just terrific. So I like Straight Time very much. We had a great screening of that at Noir City. Were you there then?
That Noir City was not a good time in my life, so
I'm sorry to hear that.
I didn't see a lot of the films that year.
Yeah, I'm very happy we showed that film. That was that was a whole thing of heist movies, and it was a great movie to show because it, just as Brian is talking about, it's so ultra realistic, and you know, there's a heist in that film where you see all these intricately planned things, and the heist in this one is Hoffman and Harry Dean Stanton like they just do a smash and grab in a jewelry store.
Yeah.
That is, it's just mind-boggling. You know, he's just smashing the cases and grabbing everything he can, the glass and the jewels and everything, with these big, heavy industrial gloves. And it's like, let's get out of here. And it like all takes about a minute. And then they have to find the car when they run out of the jewelry store. It's really, really a good film. So anyway, that's thank you for that question, Brian. Okay, now let's see what we got here. Joe from Suffolk County, New York says, you have praised Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins novels and the film Devil in a Blue Dress from 1995. In the recently released Every Man a King, based on a Mosley novel, TCM gets a mention, as do the following. I'm kind of curious about this because I don't think Every Man a King has been made into a film. I think the book just came out earlier this year, so I think it's still just a book.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I don't think there's a movie of it.
Yeah, yet. That may have been my fault in editing.
Okay.
Not him's.
Anyway, early on, Oliver, and it's that's King Oliver is the character. He's like Walter Mosley's. He's the new Easy Rawlins. That's a trite way of saying it, but he's his new protagonist. Is loaned an old coin which he identifies as a brasher doubloon. Any thoughts on the Chandler book or the film? Well, I'm just going to say right off that, because no disrespect to Walter, but I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know anything about the book itself. I know the premise of the book, which sounds really fantastic: a black private eye who was hired to help free a white supremacist from prison. Interesting premise. As for the brasher doubloon, I think it's probably the weakest of the Chandler novels that in my estimation. I don't know why I say that. It just doesn't have the memorable characters that the other books have. So I'm not big on the brasher doubloon as a book. And there's much to recommend about the movie version, but it's not George Montgomery playing Marlowe. It's the cinematography and John Brahms' way he depicts L.A. like L.A. was Berlin. That's what's kind of interesting. Okay, he also says a character is described as a Sidney Greenstreet on steroids. If you were to name your Mount Rushmore of Sidney Greenstreet movies, which two would you add to the obvious choice? How about you, Anne? I saying that Casper Gutman in The Maltese Falcon is the ultimate Sidney Greenstreet performance. So what other two would you put on the Sidney Greenstreet Mount Rushmore, which is funny to think about because it would be the three faces of Sidney Greenstreet.
Yeah. I'm trying to to decide because performance I really like of his, even though the overall film isn't that great, but I just really like him in it, is the one where Humphrey Bogart murders his wife.
Conflict.
Conflict. And like I said, I mean, it's not like a great film necessarily, but I really, really, really like Sidney Greenstreet's performance in that.
I actually think that's a very underrated film.
Okay, good.
I think it's great, and
Yeah.
I agree. Greenstreet is great, and he's the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still. What's great about Sidney Greenstreet playing a good guy is there's still this like sinister undercurrent that you're never quite sure.
Yeah.
Because a film that I've shown this year a bunch of times that has really taken folks by surprise is The Velvet Touch.
Yeah.
The Rosalind Russell movie where he plays like in Conflict. He's not a cop or anything in Conflict, but he is in The Velvet Touch. He's a police investigator.
Yeah.
Who's investigating the murder of this Broadway producer, and he's also a huge fan of Rosalind Russell, who is playing an actress who actually committed the crime, but he doesn't want to believe it because he idolizes her so much.
Yeah.
And it's an offbeat performance for him, and he's really good in it. But I love The Mask of Demetrios.
Yeah.
It's just such a good movie, and he's clearly just doing Sidney Greenstreet in the film, but the way he and Laurie play off each other is just so fantastic. Do you have another one besides
the one
Conflict?
with him and with the cat, the gold cat. It's like a fantasy. It's more like a fantasy thing. It's like he, Laurie, and
Geraldine Fitzgerald.
Geraldine Fitzgerald. Yeah.
Yeah, Three Strangers.
Three Strangers.
That was my other choice. Yes.
Yeah.
He is Jerome K. Arbuthnot. Yes, barrister at law. Yeah. Oh, he's fantastic in that film. To me, that's his greatest screen performance.
Yeah.
Is in that film because his meltdown in that movie when he realizes that everything has gone to hell is phenomenal. It's just the greatest.
And that's like, you don't usually see him having a meltdown too. I mean, that's part of why I like the film so much is it's a very different, he got to do something really pretty different in that.
As an actor, he must have been thrilled to read that script because he goes all over the place in that film, right? He's naive and sarcastic and dismissive, and then he has to put on that act for Rosalind Ivins, who's a great one of his clients, and he's trying to con her out of her money, and he so beautifully plays that whole thing. And then when it all turns to hell and he becomes this crazy man at the end.
Yeah.
And then the end of that film when he walks out into the street in London.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but he does like the 1,000-yard stare, just lumbering through the streets of London. It's fabulous.
And also The Woman in White,
which I have never seen. It's one of those films like I got to have a Sidney Greenstreet movie in reserve so that there's something left for me when I'm on my deathbed. I can say, I want to watch a Sidney Greenstreet movie that I haven't seen.
Because that's one of the great villains in literature. So it was really great to see. And he was a really, really good choice for that role.
Okay. See, I got to have something to look forward to in this life, Anne. And
no, absolutely.
The Woman in White, I still haven't seen it. So, okay. And then Joe snuck in a lot of questions here. He says, Oliver, and this is still going back to the Walter Mosley novel. Yeah. Oliver mentioned Steve McQueen's last movie, The Hunter. I question whether that was actually Steve McQueen's last movie. I thought Enemy of the People was Steve McQueen's last movie. I thought Enemy of the People
was his last movie too.
I streamed it on Amazon Prime, and I'm afraid I found it disappointing. I would like to hear your opinions. Well, I'm going to have a double bill of The Woman in White and The Hunter because I haven't seen either of them. I haven't seen The Hunter.
I have not seen The Hunter either.
Yeah, it just seemed like Steve McQueen collecting a paycheck. I hate to say that because I haven't seen the movie and I don't know. It may be a surprisingly great film, something along the lines of what's the great uh, Richard Fleischer movie with Charles Bronson, Mr. Majestic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a movie that like people dismissed as like, really? And it's like, it's great. It's that's to me peak Charles Bronson, and Richard Fleischer does a beautiful job directing that movie. That was an Elmore Leonard story, and it's just great. And people don't give it credit. So I don't know. The Hunter could be another one of those, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say.
Okay. And this is Sue from San Francisco. A few months ago, Eddie was traveling with Tizzy, which got me thinking about the difficulties, practicalities. Did Tizzy go on an airplane, stay in a hotel room, hotel bar? Please tell us. Please tell us of your Tizzy travel adventures.
That's pretty funny. Well, Tizzy just went with me to Las Vegas last week. I did a event at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, which I highly recommend to anybody. If you're going to Las Vegas, you have to go to the Mob Museum. It really is a beautifully designed and extremely well run museum, and it's in the old. It was a post office that turned into a courthouse, which is where Estes Kefauver held his organized crime hearings in Nevada on the influence of organized crime on gambling in Nevada. And I did a presentation and made cocktails in the room where Kefauver held these hearings, and I actually had a film clip of Estes Kefauver from the captive city delivering his thing that ends with, "But thank goodness, the plague of organized crime has been, beaten back, and there is no more gambling." And it's just like, holy God. And to be in Las Vegas in 2023, here, playing that film clip in a museum built around organized crime and the success organized crime had, bringing gambling to the state of Nevada was really something. So I
Yeah.
was able to make a cocktail in Kefauver's honor, and serve that to the assembled group. So, but Tizzy travels very well. Uh, she actually, I think, likes to travel more than she likes to be home now,
Oh.
and because I can't have wall-to-wall carpets in my house because I have some respiratory issues, and so I have hardwood floors, which as she gets older and more arthritic are harder for her to navigate. So when she goes to a hotel and it has carpeting, she loves to walk around because she's like steady, and she like trucks around the room, and it's like, this is great. And she travels on the plane. She, as long as she fits under the seat in front of me, that's why we try to get a middle seat so she can go under the middle seat and doesn't take up leg room. And the best part of traveling with Tizzy is when you're in the TSA security line, and I carry my suitcases and my work, and then I have Tizzy in a bag that looks kind of like a gym bag.
Yeah.
And invariably, this has probably happened 6 or 8 times now. People get really ticked off with me in line because I take a little extra time, because I got to take my laptop out. I got to do all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then I unzip the bag, because you have to carry your
Mhm.
pet through security. And I take Tizzy out. And then all those people who are hating on me are like, oh my God, she's so cute. Oh, I can't believe it. And she's totally calm. She's totally chill. Like people would imagine a cat like freaking out in the airport and all that. She doesn't care whatsoever. As long as I'm holding her, she's fine. It's all good. So she is a great traveler, and I anticipate her going with. She can't go with me on the TCM cruise, unfortunately. Disney will not allow pets on the cruise, and Tizzy does not qualify as an emotional support animal. Or I'm not weird enough to qualify for an emotional support animal, whatever. I'm
Maybe
the
you're her
emotional.
emotional support person.
I am. I'm the emotional support human, but they're not buying that. So anyway, Sue, thank you for that question. Okay, so here we go. Bill in Pleasant Hill, California, my neighbor. You're not far away, Bill. Eddie, question. How do you think it would go if James Elroy and Hunter S. Thompson found themselves seated at a table in a small room together? It seems to me to be a match made in heaven or hell, maybe. Well, it's not going to happen because Hunter S. Thompson is dead, so we don't have to worry about this actually happening. Uh, I don't think it would go particularly well for various reasons. Namely, James Elroy uh, does not drink or do any kind of drugs. He is straight edge all the way. And Hunter S. Thompson, I don't think would know what to do with himself if he didn't have drink or drugs for 15 minutes, every 15 minutes. So that's not going to work. And of course, Elroy, I probably shouldn't say this because it probably doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But Elroy fancies himself an arch conservative these days, and Thompson was like beyond any classifications of like liberal or libertarian or whatever. I mean, he was just berserk.
Yeah.
But two incredibly smart guys. I never met. No, that's not true. I actually did meet Hunter S. Thompson at the 1984 Democratic Convention in San Francisco, which I was covering as a journalist, and Thompson was in the Railroad Press Lounge for like 10 minutes, and we had a very brief conversation. This was not. He was also. It was around this time that he was also working. He was writing for the San Francisco Examiner and was working as the night manager of the Mitchell Brothers Theater on O'Farrell Street, which I think he was doing just to like get material for his columns and stuff. But I can see there's similarities between them in terms of their personalities and their idiosyncrasies and stuff. But there's such big personalities. I don't think a small table in a small room would be advisable.
Yeah, and for people, this is like trivia about my life, but I live on O'Farrell Street, like 3 blocks down from the Mitchell Theater.
Yeah. Well, have you ever been in the O'Farrell Theater, Ann?
No, of course not.
Well, I always ask. I don't know.
No, it's funny because one time I was in
North
Beach. Me and Brendan were in North Beach, and this guy outside a strip club was like, "Hey, you guys want to come in?" And stuff. I'm like, "No." He goes, "Women come in here," and I'm like, "Are there naked men?" No, I'm not interested.
then you're not interested. Okay. I have had several intriguing adventures at the O'Farrell Theater, and I did work for Jim Mitchell for a time. That's a whole other story as a writer, because Jim Mitchell published a newspaper in the 1980s, of which I was the sports editor of the paper, and I definitely knew both Jim and Artie, and I'm not going to say I was close to them at all, but I remember the day that Jim killed Artie.
Yeah.
If people remember that story, that he went to his house and he had a rifle down the leg of his pants, and he knocked on the door, and his brother answered the door, and talk about a biblical story. Jim killed his brother. Just stunning. And I remember when that happened, my reaction was, I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like there are things that are just like shocking, like a brother kills a brother, and it's like, wow, that's horrible. But then if you spend a lot of time with them, it wasn't totally a surprise. It didn't completely come out of the blue.
Yeah.
You just kind of couldn't believe that he actually did that.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So I added one bonus question because I like this one. It came in not that long ago, but as soon as I saw this, I said, I want to do this. So this is from Conrad. Conrad Steve says, correct me if I am wrong, but I believe Eddie does not particularly care for in-depth academic studies of film noir and prefers a historical and production emphasis for such studies. If this is true, what is it about those aspects of an academic, intellectual approach to film noir that rings hollow to you? Okay, so I just wanted, and I'd love to know your perspective on this as well, Anne, and the books about film that you read, because you cited, the what was it, the
Men, Women, and
Men,
Chainsaws.
Women,
Yeah.
and Chainsaws book, which is a very academic book, a look at violence against women in horror films and things. Uh, but when I wrote Dark City, my entire motivation for writing the book was to reclaim film noir from the completely academic approach to the subject. And there's a lot that can be said about this, but one of the issues I have is that I think a lot of academic works are based on uh, a thesis that people write in college or something, elaborated upon to get a book. Because as you know, in academia, it's publish or perish.
Hmm.
If you don't get a book published, then you don't have the degree of credibility that universities want to see in their professors and things. And obviously, I know a lot of great academics like Foster Hirsch and Jacqueline Stewart and many others. Jake Hinkson, who writes for the Noir City magazine, teaches film, and I would consider him to be an academic who doesn't actually write like an academic. And when I say that, what I mean is, I think in university, students are um, they're basically making a case for their opinion of something.
Yeah.
Like you have to come up with an idea that shows intellectual capacity and the facility to make your argument in a coherent and forceful fashion, right? But your argument doesn't have to be based on any kind of actual reality. It can just be, this is what I see in these movies, right? And I think that and then you kind of can bend the movies to fit your agenda. And that's kind of what I don't appreciate, because my background is as a journalist, and I try not to start with preconceived notions, right? So the one thing that I've always harped on is, like, there was so much academic stuff written about what film noir meant because of the time it appeared, that said it was a backlash. The idea of the femme fatale in film noir was a backlash against women taking men's places in the workforce during World War II. You can find a lot of scholarly papers on this subject, and I don't buy that for one split second.
Well, no, and I forgot who's. Oh God, I can't remember who wrote the book, but they were talking about women in film noir, and it was just sort of pointing out that that tradition sort of came from the German street films. And she was just sort of going through the history of it, which didn't really have anything to do with that kind of theory. She was just tracing like where these characters came from and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, I've read a lot of really good academic books on horror, because horror is, it's an interesting genre because in some ways it's much more folkloric. I mean,
Yes.
it's a very different genre from a lot of other genres. So it's always pulling on all the stuff that's really primitive into our brain. And it does in horror because of the nature of it being sort of a popular genre. It tends to be really reflective of its time as well. So there is a lot that's sort of going on, and there's some like horror writing I don't particularly care for that's sort of extremely feminist and not necessarily where I really feel like they're kind of pushing the boundary a little too much. I mean, because one of the reasons why Women in Chainsaws was such a seminal book. And by the way, she's a law professor. She's not a film professor.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Was that she was looking at the films and the audience and of course, it was always assumed that horror was for like a sadistic male audience. And she was kind of pointing out that you're seeing these films in the 80s where the one who survives is a woman and all the things that sort of came out for. And she doesn't talk just about slasher films, but other stuff. So she was very much sort of turning that, and also pointing out that it's not just men who go to horror films and that's one of the big sort of readings of horror is that it's specifically like for this male audience when that's really not the case.
Yeah,
There's a lot, you know,
I agree. I hear what you're saying, and I think that when I was a journalist, and to this day I still apply this. It's like you're taught, who, what, where, when, why, and how, and then I have always added the why part of it. You have to go at 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. It's like, why? Why did this happen at the time it happened? What were the factors? Why? You just keep asking why. And I don't find that a lot of academic writing asks the why multiple times, because once it fits the agenda of the thesis that you're trying to put out there, then you're just looking at the examples that fit your thesis.
yeah,
And I don't approve of that. And I also think that a lot of times people are saying, well, this happened because the threat of the atomic bomb was so strong. This is what led to these movies. It's like, to me, that shows a total misunderstanding of the movie business,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
they're trying to be topical, but if you think that concern about any of this stuff is what drives the creation of these movies, you don't actually understand the way the business works, right? I mean, it is a business. The business aspects of the movie are the primary thing. And that's why I've always said that film noir is so fascinating, because it was a movement created by and perpetuated by the artists themselves.
well, yeah, and I think that's why it reminds me of horror in the same way. Like right now, I think the best films coming out right now are horror films, and the reason why is that they don't cost a lot of money, so the people that write and direct them tend to have way more control over their project because the money stake isn't there. So you're getting a lot of really, really creative things happening in horror films, and also a lot of times a lot of social commentary in horror films, which has always been true
Yes, absolutely.
because of that, because they're just not. It's not hard to make money off a horror film, so who cares if you know what I mean? It's like,
And I have to say, and the flip side of that is when you get a really interesting premise. Like, I don't want to advertise for this movie because I didn't like it, but there's a new Netflix film about a love affair in a hedge fund corporation, and as I'm watching this film last night, I realized, they probably sold this as a horror film,
yeah,
because so many movies now skew that way,
yeah,
right? It's like, oh, man falls in love with woman, then woman gets the promotion that the man wanted. The man loses his mind, and is this going to turn into a horror film,
yeah,
right? And the promise that it could turn into a horror film is what sells the movie
yeah,
to Netflix and to the audience,
yeah,
because then the trailer is cut in such a way that this is going to be a horror film.
Yeah.
and it may not turn out to be that. You know, and so it's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of a you know, I love movies that surprise you and go in a direction that's like, wow, I did not see that
Yeah.
coming. You know, that's kind of what we live for, right? It's
Yeah.
like I had I call it the squirm factor.
Yeah.
Like I'm squirming because I've been watching movies my entire life, and I'm watching a movie where I do not know what's going to happen next.
I love that feeling. I
That's
love that.
That's it. That's what you live for as a viewer, right? I was like, I do not know what's going to happen. Unfortunately, this movie we watched last night, it's like they're going to do this now, right? Oh shit,
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to
Yeah.
do that. Oh Christ, oh
Well,
Jesus, you know.
I recommend the film Barbarian if you haven't seen it.
I
If you
have
want,
not seen it,
if you
so
want to see, don't read anything about it. It's a good movie. It's worth watching because I went in super blind and yeah, it was like
great,
didn't
great.
see that
Okay,
coming.
thank you for that recommendation. Okay, and we went way over,
Way over. I
way
know.
over,
Way
but
over.
man, that was a I don't know what the viewers think, but I had a really good time. This
I had a
was
really good time
really
too.
really good questions, and it was a lot of fun doing this one. So they're all fun, but
Yeah.
this one felt especially good. Even though Emily is just couldn't care less, she's just totally sacked out there.
It's really tiring being an Emily. Okay, really quick, what are your Halloween noir horror picks for people that they should watch for Halloween since we're right
Well,
around the corner?
like you said, all those Val Lewton pictures. I actually did an interview with some magazine where I said the Val Lewton pictures. What's the scariest movie you've ever seen, Anne?
The scariest one I've ever seen?
Yeah,
Oh
what's the
boy.
scariest movie you've ever seen? Doesn't necessarily mean it's your Halloween pick, but I'm just
The
curious.
Haunting is one of, I think, the scariest films I've ever seen. It's the scariest paranormal film I've ever seen for sure. I don't know if people have not seen that, but that is what stood the test of time.
Great film. All praise to Robert Wise, the master of every genre.
Every
He's the
genre.
best.
It's an amazing film.
Yep.
And it's good for general audiences, so people anybody can
Exactly. I mean, that's a
anybody.
perfect Halloween pick.
Yeah.
Because it's not bloody, it's not, but it's really really scary.
And you'll just realize what a piece of crap the Conjuring films are, and Blair Witch Project, and almost every supernatural film is being made right now.
I hear you. I'm a huge fan of Don't Look Now.
Oh God, I
Since
love
we were
that
talking
movie.
about Nick Rogue earlier.
Yeah, and we
I'm a
talked
huge
about that
fan.
movie the last time. Oh my God, yeah, that everyone. That's a God. I love that movie.
Yeah, but since the last time we talked about it, I read some guy online saying, "What's the big deal with this movie? Nothing happens," and it's like, wow, does this person need a education in film and just life in general?
I was
You
going to
know,
say
like
that's a tremendous lack of empathy.
holy cow. It's like these people are boring and their kid's dead and who cares? And it was like, oh my God. Because that movie is, to me, that's a very, very, that's a great Halloween movie because it's, to me, that's the ultimate example of the movie where you think you know what's happening and something else entirely is happening and you're oblivious to it.
Yeah.
And eventually it's going to bite you in the ass. Or worse. So that's pretty good. I know on TCM I'm showing, it's weird, it's not really a Halloween movie, but I'm showing Experiment in Terror as my Halloween movie on TCM, which is really great. Anyway,
and seriously, guys, Psycho's always up there. I'm very fond of the William Castle ripoff of Psycho called Homicidal.
Oh, I love Homicidal. I love Homicidal with the great Gene Arliss.
Oh man, love that movie. I love that movie.
Glenn Corbett, Richard Rust, and Gene Arliss. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have always wanted to do a midnight show of Homicidal at Noir City.
That'd be so fantastic. I just think it would
bring the house down. It is, yeah. That's
that's
my favorite William Castle movie.
And The Nightwalker, Barbara Stanwyck and her ex-husband back together.
Yeah, and Robert Taylor and Stanwyck back together. Yeah.
Yeah, but I really do. Yeah.
Well, I hope everybody has a good Halloween. If we don't, we're gonna. I don't know when we're gonna do another one of these, but it'll be. I'll sneak it in sometime during all of this stuff I've got
Craziness. I know you're going
coming
to be
up
like,
in
okay,
the next 4 weeks or so. But then after that, things will settle down. So,
okay.
and an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
I like your earrings.
Oh yeah, aren't these great? I love these. I
Yeah,
get yeah, they're my super cheap Macy's earrings because I get Macy's points because I buy a lot of stuff from them. So basically I get all this really great jewelry for free because that's just
great.
what I use my
Good for
Macy's
you.
points
Good for
on.
you. Yeah, I had a Macy's credit card for quite a while. I haven't been shopping for a while though, but I'll get back to it. Okay,
Okay,
and I'm gonna go eat my dinner now.
you go eat your dinner and good luck with everything because you've
Thank
got a
you, and
busy
I
couple weeks ahead of you.
indeed.
And we'll figure out a time to record and hopefully we'll see you all soon. And happy Halloween, everyone. You've probably guessed it's my favorite
Okay, thank you everybody for the great questions and for always for tuning in. It's wonderful to find out when I go on the road how many people come up to me and say, I watch you and Ann
holiday.
religiously, on Thursday nights, and it's great. It's terrific. So there you go. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Bye.